Welcome back to Gale Force Wins Season 4.
Hello, folks. Gale Force Wins. I'm Jerry Carew, the co-founder. We are approaching our 200th and 33rd episode. In fact, that's what this episode is. So we are well through 2024. And what I wanted to do was actually summarize the top 10 episodes of 2024. To have 233 or 232 guests on Gale Force Wins every Tuesday evening has been an absolute privilege. Just to let you know, we actually started on Zoom, which is the platform I'm talking on here right now, recording it. However, the majority of the episodes that I'm going to highlight were all done in person. A couple, I believe, were done on Zoom. Was anything done on Zoom? No, none of them. So what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about each episode and then have an excerpt of each. So this is the top 10 episodes of 2024 so far, and starting with number 1. On March 26th, we sat down with Jason Stock. It is episode 209. The excerpt that you're going to hear is a little bit about Jason and what his advice is after being through what I could only describe as one of the most challenging times in anyone's life, addictions, depression, and the number 1 episode for Gale Force Wins for 2024. And if you listen to the full episode, I think you'll know why. Here's a little excerpt from Jason.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm glad you're back from the Turks and Caicos. But yeah, my name's Jason Stock. I am in the local St. John's tech community. I work for a company called Unity Tech in a sales and customer support capacity. And yeah, like I've been in that community for about 10 years. And I'm also, the path where I'm discovering myself through some self-improvement stuff. And when I post online, sometimes I'm talking about Unity and the fantastic, wonderful world of 3D printing. And sometimes I'm talking about some more interesting topics, you could say, such as like sobriety and what those kind of journeys are look like. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Yeah, well, I mean, I think for years and years and years, well, the AA program, which is very successful, has a lot of people meeting in church basements under the veil of anonymity for a very good reason, because there is a stigma, right? And that's changing a little bit. But I remember that word alcoholic felt like poison in my mouth. I did not like that word, and I did not like the stigma that came with it. But eventually I made friends with it. And I realized that, one of the things that they say in meetings is it's not what you drank, it's not how much you drank, it's how it affected you when you drank. And for me, I developed a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol. The definitions of alcoholic fit. And then I was like, you know what, I'm just not going to be ashamed of this, because if I had any other disease or infliction, or mental health disorder, there wouldn't be an issue around that. And there are thousands and thousands of people that if they ingest a drink, it changes them on a biological and chemical level, and they become different people and they make different choices. And there's a whole number of different reasons for that. And so part of the way that I combat shame and stigma is it can't exist when you put it into the light. And I knew that people couldn't point and laugh at me behind my back or make judgments behind my back if I just said it out loud and on purpose. So it was my own survival mechanism to be public and upfront and out in the open, and it worked out for me. I'm not saying that that's everyone's path. there are some people that may never want to become public with these types of things, and that's their choice, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs to be public about these types of things. But the reason that I'm public is that I believe that there are people that are like me, that are out there, that are listening to things like this, and they need to hear the stories of other people that have gone through what they're going through. And if they go to the rooms of AA or NA, they're going to hear those stories. But some people never make it into those rooms. They never cross the threshold, and they die before they get there, or they make it in and they don't change and they go out and they die. Because the one thing that's true about this disease of addiction is that once you've crossed the line from drinking was fun to it was fun with some problems to it was problems with some fun, once you hit the line where it's all problems, there ain't no going back.
Yeah.
And from there, there's three places that it goes. It's jails, institutions, and death. And people need to understand that reality. That if you've gotten to the place where that alcohol has you by the throat like that, that's where it goes. And so that's why I think talking about these things and bringing it out into the light and removing the shame from it is important.
Well, you know, part of the reason we actually met for the first time at the Tech NL thing, and after you said to me, I have some more to say, and I got a sense that it was what we're talking about right now. And I'm telling you, Jason, I really appreciate you coming on here. Hopefully, the people that need this conversation, that happen to be following Gale Force Wins, have stayed with this. We're about 50 minutes into this now, and you know, my concern is that the moment you start talking about sobriety, people tune out. But I guess they need to be ready, don't they? You know.
Yeah. Well, what I've learned too is that this is a family disease. You know, everyone has a drunk uncle that comes to Thanksgiving every year and, you know, makes a fool of himself. And I don't know anybody who isn't in one way, shape, or form have been affected by addiction at some point. And one thing that the pandemic did is it raised our levels of drinking and consumption because we were all stuck at home. We're drinking more, and unfortunately, with a lot of people, bad things happen when you start increasing the volume of alcohol, and it's hard to go back.
Yeah.
And so, although this message isn't for everybody, and it may not be alcohol, but I truly believe everybody has a thing. Everybody has a thing that has gnawed at them and has made their life less than it could be. And if it's not alcohol, it could be something else. And my hope is that some of the lessons that I've learned in sobriety and recovery that have helped me get sober can help people in all walks of life, whether they've dealt with addiction or not.
On April 23rd, 2024, we featured Elanor Fin Fin Krazinowski. That is episode 213. Elanor is an entrepreneur based in the Turks and Caicos and in Massachusetts, Boston to be exact. She is a phenomenal force of nature. We were lucky enough to meet her when we were in the Turks and Caicos, and we did some work with her. Elanor Fin Fin Krazinowski is a woman entrepreneur who is doing amazing things on the marketing side. This excerpt that you're going to listen to now is worth your time, and I tell you, episode 213 with Elanor is worth your full attention.
I am Charles Chuck Ferlot, and I am here today in Providenciales, Turks and Caicos, with Elanor Fin Fin Krazinowski, founder and director of Cardinal Points, a marketing and communications firm. And we're here to talk a little bit about your fascinating journey through life, Elanor. So tell me a little bit about growing up here and how you got to this incredible point in time.
Chuck, thank you so much for having me. It has been an incredible journey of faith. And I say faith because a lot of the situations that I was in that led me here today, it could have only been fate that has led me here. I was born and raised in these beautiful islands, and coming from here, obviously the opportunities that are available for people in the United States or the United Kingdom wasn't readily available here.
No, because you would, for example, after high school, you have to get off the island.
You do. If you want to get a tertiary level education, you have to leave.
You have to leave home.
Well, unless you want to go to the community college, then we do have.
Sure.
But full disclaimer: during my time, the community college was just starting. It isn't what it is today, and it wasn't back then at the level that it is today. So they are making good progress in terms of encouraging people to stay on the island and to pursue education there. But when I graduated high school in the late 90s, it was a different situation. And if you wanted to study a particular subject, then you had to leave the island. And in order to leave the island, it takes quite a bit of finance to leave the island.
And you went to Beantown. You ended up in Boston.
I did. It was the most interesting experience because you come from an island where it is tropical weather year round, and you're shoved into Boston, where you have 4 seasons. And you know, if you've been to Boston, you're from the Northeast, so you're familiar with the weather, and sometimes the weather's not as kind. It's pretty brutal.
Did you get to a Red Sox game?
I did. You cannot live in Boston and not get into the sports.
Oh, it's a total sports. Boston Bruins. Yeah.
It's so bizarre. Like, even I came from an island where sports wasn't a big thing, but once you're there, you feel the vibe, like the love for the Patriots, the Sox, the Bruins, even the Celtics. It's so big. You get sucked in, especially being a college student. Most of the fans are college students, so you get sucked into the frenzy, and you have to become a sports
So
fan.
what college did you go to?
I went to the Eastern Nazarene College.
Eastern Nazarene.
It's a private Christian university on the South Shore.
Lovely.
Yes, it was it was an interesting experience.
Boston has a multitude of schools within a 50-mile radius.
It does. Like, it's a collegiate town, and everybody, it's a melting pot, and everybody's there. It's such a beautiful city.
So what did you study?
I did corporate communication. Well, business communication, to be
So
exact.
you're actually doing what you studied for.
I did, and it's interesting how I ended up doing communication, because when I first went there, I was pre-law. And in order to be on the pre-law track, you had to do history. And then I knew I couldn't do American history because I've never studied American history. I came from the Caribbean. So
did you grow up in Providenciales?
I did, in Blue Hills. So that's on the north side, right across the water.
Correct.
Yes.
So did Mom and Dad ever make it to Boston?
They did. They did. Well, my dad came for my graduation, but my mom visited pretty often.
So was your heart beating like this the first time you arrived in Boston?
Well, before I went to school there, we went, because we have a relative there. We ended up visiting a relative for the summer. Then I have an older sister. She went first.
Okay, so there's a little bit of ground plowed.
There is, because my mom, coming from a small island, my mother was very apprehensive about just shoving us in the city and leaving us to fend for ourselves.
Of course.
So she was more, once I got the scholarship from Eastern Nazarene, she was very comfortable, because I was 16 at the time. She was more comfortable having me go there and experience the city.
Did you live on campus?
I did not. I ended up staying with my aunt.
Okay.
And then my sister was there. Then from there, my sister and I were able to get our own.
And were you homesick?
I was. The first year was incredibly difficult, especially with winter. Not being accustomed to winter, not being able to go outside. The culture was different. The country was different. So it was an adjustment from being here.
So you spent 4 years in Boston?
I was in Boston for 9 years.
9 years? Wow.
9 years.
So you worked there after?
I worked there after. And then in between that 9 years, I was in Kenya for a year, because I did a study abroad program. Yes, I did a study abroad program, which with a sister school of the school I went to. So I was at African Nazarene University. And then once I was done with African Nazarene University.
It was affiliated with the Boston School?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, it was a sister school in Kenya, and I know I wanted to go there for the intercultural experience. And I was also doing a research at the time for a dissertation I was writing. So I felt being in that environment and being there would work perfectly for me. But like I said, it's an interesting journey of faith, and I have to credit the many people who saw my zeal and saw what I wanted to do, that contributed not only emotionally but also financially to my journey. So there's a lot of people that has been very, very supportive financially in terms of me reaching my dream and getting my
So you
degree.
started your professional career in Boston.
I started my professional career, yes, in Boston, yes. And then,
And was that with a large corporate communications firm? Or?
no, it was a small communication firm. I worked for Quincy Access Television, which is a small TV station in the city of Quincy, Massachusetts. I did an internship there. Then I did some other work. I did some other freelancing work for different companies across the city. Then I came here and did a rebrand for, it was Cable and Wireless back then, but then it became Line. And then from now it's Flow now, but I did a rebrand for them. Then I ended up staying on the island. And from there I worked for Sandals for about 9 years. And then in 2020, I took a leap of faith and went into doing Cardinal Points full time, because Cardinal Points we were doing part time. 2008.
How'd you get the name?
My husband, I got to give him all credit for Cardinal Points, because we were torn as to what to call it. I wanted to call it Albatrust. And then he was like, wait, why don't we do Cardinal Points? I'm like, well, why Cardinal Points? He's like, our slogan can be, we're here to point you in the right direction. I'm like, that is so clever. So he did the logo, he came up with the name, and here
where'd
we
you
are.
meet your husband?
I met my husband in the U.S. We were introduced by our college friends.
Oh, okay.
And it's interesting how we just hit it off. We met each other. We saw each other's pictures. We met each other and just hit it off. And it's been almost 13 years.
That's terrific. So it wasn't Match.com.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was our friends. Because my best friend was dating his best friend at the time. It was like, hey, you guys should meet.
So a blind date. Kind of, sort of.
Well, we had video call in between.
Oh, that's cheating a little bit,
Sort of,
but that's
yes.
okay.
Yeah, so it was interesting, and we met each other, and our values were the same, and we thought it was a good match, and we are a good match.
Yeah.
We are.
So tell me about your firm now and the kind of work you do.
Well, we do corporate communication. We're a full-service corporate communication company. We do everything from public relations, advertising, marketing, social media management, corporate event planning, brand management, and a list of so much. Like we said, we're full service. Once it's something that falls within the communication realm, it's something that we will do. And we're flexible enough to work with the clients. Even if it's something that falls outside of what we do, we're flexible enough to accommodate that client and that request.
And is most of your work here on the island?
Most of our clients are here on the island, but we also have a few clients in the United States as
Good.
well. Because the business is registered in the Turks and Caicos. In Turks and Caicos, it's Cardinal Points Turks and Caicos, but in the U.S., it's Cardinal Points International.
Yeah.
So we try to operate in both countries as much as we can.
Terrific.
Yes.
Terrific. So have you found much of a change to your work post-COVID?
I think the work is more, because I feel like a lot of companies and organizations around the world is looking to disseminate more information, and that's where we step in helping you craft that information and help you tell your story, tell a tailored story to the audience you're looking to tell the story to. So most of our business came from COVID and post-COVID communication, because we do crisis management as well and crisis communication. And then once we're able to, once the world reopened and everything started to come back to normal, then we started doing different things, like social media management for various companies, managing their brand portfolio, because we have a lot of CEOs that want to be seen and branded in a certain way, and it's our job to point them in that right direction, tell them what story we should be telling and what stories we should not be telling. And we've been very fortunate to have some pretty impressive clients that we've been working with, even here in Turks and Caicos and the U.S. So like I said, our job is to craft a brand and make sure it is seen in the positive light, and make sure that it, like our particular brand subject, tells an inspirational story.
April 16th, we sat down with John Reid. John, and he's actually in his coffee shop in Orlando. His coffee shop is Bynx, B-Y-N-X. It is in Orlando, and it is an incredible coffee shop. It's just got a really interesting vibe to it. John is originally from Gander, and he was involved in the telecommunications industry. It's episode 212. Listen to this excerpt and actually go to the full episode. It'll be worth your time.
Well, Jerry, I am from St. John's, at least from a school and work perspective. I grew up in Gander and worked in the telecommunications industry for 30 years. Left Canada, Newfoundland in 2005 and worked my way through the Caribbean and Latin America, and landed in South Florida until I decided to retire about 6 years ago and venture into this particular industry.
So, there's a lot to unpack there, but let me ask you this. Your retirement lasted how long?
As long as it took to build this out, really about 3 months, the business plan was starting to be developed. So I guess you could say it lasted a couple of years only because we couldn't open the doors until then, till we built it out. But, a lot of preparation work, I guess.
So your idea of retirement was to retire by opening up another business.
Yeah, and I guess even though I told people I was retiring, it was just a nice way to exit a company when you felt it was time to leave. And so I kind of had this concept in my head for 4 or 5 years, and I wanted to get at it. Got permission, I guess, from my better half to get back into things, and then focus on some of my family members and started this venture together.
Well, John, I'm going to say this. This is beautiful. We'll delve into BYNX, B-Y-N-X, and what it all means in a minute. But let's go back to your childhood in Gander.
Yeah.
Were there any influences that brought you into the world of business, or is this something that just happened to you?
That's a great question. I think I could look at one great family in Gander that we spoke of before, and Herriott Steele, and EPA, and the hotels, and knew the boys growing up. And I think I always was amazed at entrepreneurs. My father-in-law was a successful businessman and entrepreneur, and put everything on the line at times, and I thought that took a lot of guts. So I think with me, I look around the people that I had a chance to work for. Brendan Paddock, my good friend, and John Risley, and these guys, they see opportunities. They're not afraid to take risks, and this just felt like the right risk for me.
It's interesting, you grew up in Gander, you're surrounded by entrepreneurs, and it's interesting. There's an entrepreneur who opens up a store, and then there's Herriott Steele.
Yeah.
I mean,
at both ends of it.
Prior to his passing, when they sold out, I think they had 100 radio stations.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to me, Herriott Steele, who I met many times, very motivational individual,
yes,
wasn't he?
Yeah, very well. And also just a very interested person in what you were doing. Like Harry was always, when I would run into him, and my mom and dad knew him very well. My father was priest in Gander, Anglican minister, so he knew everybody. And my mom was very heavily involved in the community. But Harry, every time I ran into him over the years, he always wanted to know what I was doing. He always asked about my parents, but he knew where I was. He knew what my job was. But Harry was always interested in how things were going, and I always felt that was a special trait that not too many very successful businessmen have.
Just want to make a note. A friend of mine one time said, Jerry, why do you continue to look at your phone? I'm not looking at my emails. I'm actually monitoring the process technically of the audio and all that. So just wanted to make that point. Growing up in Gander and seeing those entrepreneurs, and I guess the airport was still pretty active at that time.
It was, and also the Canadian Forces Base, of course. So, and they were integrated well within the community. But yeah, the airport was, and the airport was open on the international side, and of course it just reopened a couple of years ago, I think, in terms of more of a museum now. But it was an interesting place, and we had the opportunity to meet many people coming through Gander, obviously. Sunday dinner at our place would largely be our family and often Cuban refugees.
Really?
Yep. And so, we just had a different perspective, I think, growing up. It was the community, the business leaders, the airport, the Canadian Forces Base, and how all that worked in a very small town of 10,000.
Yeah. Well, John, so you are in school, and did business in school enter your head at all? I know I'm beating this topic to death,
that's
but
okay.
I'm fascinated by the I guess the foundation of an individual like yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting in Gander that when I graduated high school and left, I knew I wasn't going back, and it wasn't because I hated my town. I had a great youth. Played hockey for my entire time there. My father was the minister. Great friends, good school system. But I kind of knew when I finished that was it. I knew that whatever I was supposed to do wasn't going to be in Gander. And again, I have a lot of great friends there. I go back there every year. But I just knew for me it was going to be somewhere else. I think it was probably less business than it was probably on broader leadership. I was in involved in school activities. I was the vice president of Gander Youth Council, and then of course when I got to Memorial, I became involved heavily with the student council. So I think for me, I think it was more about the exposure I had through all my social and community involvement activities that exposed me to some opportunities that might put me in a position to do something a little bit different, I guess, down the road. But again, at the right time. And that is, I look at myself as a quasi-entrepreneur in the sense that I did it when I had kind of accomplished some other objectives and was probably in a better position to do so.
Right.
I'm more amazed at those individuals who take risks when they're doing it by their bootstraps and, they are facing to the wind, and the risks that they take always amaze me. And, you always take risks, you invest a lot of your time and financial resources and everything else. But at the same time, I think for me, I kind of planned it more than some do. And I think, again, that's why I kind of call myself a quasi-entrepreneur with a certain risk profile.
You'll laugh at this. I used to call myself a semipreneur, not an entrepreneur, because I always worked for someone else in business development, but I had a wedding video production company on the side. So I said, no, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm a semipreneur.
That's exactly right.
And morph into now, here I am.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. At the age of 57, soon to be 58, the risk profile is not as great.
Yeah.
I have some resources that I can stretch out over time.
Right.
That being said, it's still,
It is.
I'm going to just look at the place. I mean, this is incredible what you've put together here. Tell us a little bit about that, and then I'll back up to your time, in the communications business. Because this is such a beautiful place.
I appreciate that. Well, we did hire a great design company locally here in Orlando. My wife worked closely with them as I did, but really it was more, her involvement and influence. We decided to build this out in this location downtown. We wanted to be part of the downtown fabric. So it is a coffee bar, it's a recording studio, some other things as well. But it's also, as one customer told me last week, which is always good to hear, it's a community hub for artists and artistic expression. So we have a lot going on in this space, and our own activities or private events that lends itself to contributing to the community. And I was always, you asked me before I was a musician just before this, and I said, no, I'm a great guy at buying guitars. But a lot of my friends are musicians.
Yeah.
Barry Canning, Fabian James, Allan, all these guys, my son, they're all great musicians, and that's their passion. And for me, I always tried to either support them in some way professionally through sponsorship and advertising support or whatever.
March 5th, Julie Lemieux. This is our fourth top episode of 2024. Julie Lemieux is the CEO of Triple Point Resources. Actually, that one was done by Zoom, and it's episode 206. She actually blew our minds talking about the Fischl's Salt Dome. I didn't even know this thing existed, but it does, and it's basically salt inside a dome. The salt gets sold for significant profit, and then the dome can be used to store gas, liquid, hydrogen is what they're proposing. Julie Lemieux, CEO of Triple Point Resources. Here's that excerpt now.
Well, it is just fantastic to be back here on Gale Force Winds. I'm Allan Dale, and with me, as always, my two good friends from the East End of St. John's, Jerry Carew and Karen Hockel. Karen, great to have you on the show again as a co-host. Jerry, you want to give us a quick little weather update?
I didn't think you were ever going to ask. Yes, today is about 10 degrees. The snow is melting. Unfortunately, that means any of the downhill skiers on this show may be a little disappointed in that. But here in St. John's, we're excited about the melting snow, Allan.
Snow is melting. That's great. And it's the 1st of July. We're recording this. That's great, Karen. It's so wonderful to have you back. Karen, it's a real pleasure that you're joining us again. The last time you were on the show, I believe we were talking underwater robotics, and now we're talking underground, but not necessarily under the ocean. So it's great to have you back, Karen. Welcome.
Good to be back. It's always an adventure to co-host with you guys.
Julie, bienvenue. Welcome to the show. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here as well. And I've watched some of your shows and I see how positive it is. And we have a very positive project. So I think people will be excited to hear about it. So I'm Julie Lemieux, CEO of Triple Point Resources. We are, I was here to develop the dome as much as we can and find out what is basically the value, what we can do with the dome. And I want to go back to my background, and my background has been always very curious individual, but I was involved in ski racing a lot when I was a kid. So I was, and I push it through like the higher level of ski racing. So I'm used to turn every stone to figure out how you can be better, how you can win. So that drive my career always in everything I've done, and I'm very excited that it's stayed with me. I think it opened a lot of door for me over the years. And I moved from one passion to the other. I was obviously very involved in ski racing. I had a big ski accident that almost killed me when I was 16 years old. But then I had to decide what I'm going to do when I will grow up. And I decided to study in geomatics engineering because it's so, it varies from high-end math to legal, and then it brought me close to the mining industry with the government of Quebec, but also with the Port of Quebec, the Port of Rotterdam through my career. And now it seems that I came a little bit full circle on what I've done. When I moved in Calgary, I started working for the National Ski Association. That was strange, but I was doing a lot of strategic planning in my work, and I wanted to learn English because I was not speaking English that much, being a French Canadian. And I'm like, well, I know the subject, so what about I go there and I help them revamp the entire ski racing system with the background that I have in geomatics and strategic planning, and done that for 3 months. And after coming back home in my engineering work, they call me back and say, what about you come and see how you can help us implement that? And it's such a great subject for me. Couldn't resist. So I moved to Calgary for a year, and I've been here now for 20 years. And then from ski racing, I moved to helping an engineering and environmental consulting firm to grow. I'm very passionate about, when I say turning every stone to be better, to improve the process, to be faster at executing, and having reconnecting to the purpose of each organization is something that's very, very important for me. So it brought me in so many directions, but every time people ask me to help them to figure out something that they don't understand, and that this is exactly what happened with Triple Point. We're a spin out of Atlas Salt, and they wanted to maximize the value of the dome asset. So they created a separate company, and I became CEO.
Wow, what a journey from ski racing to engineering, and here we are. So, Julie, tell us a little bit about Triple Point. What exactly is that company? What do they do?
Yeah. So first, we had this asset called the Fischl Salt Dome, where it's a dome that's been discovered way back, like more than 20 years ago. So some people in Newfoundland knew about the dome. I'm kind of happy that it was never developed for the oil and gas industry at that time. I know a lot of people were trying to find potash, find oil and gas, but usually salt dome, it's used everywhere in the world to store inside cavities that you create to store hydrocarbon, natural gas, and it's something that it's commonly used in the oil and gas industry on the midstream, and like we discover the characteristic of it. We knew there was a dome there, and for me, when I started as a CEO, it was important to understand what we have. You cannot go without knowing what kind of asset you have and what's the possibilities. And very quickly, and it's definitely not my background. I don't have a background knowing what salt caverns are, but I've discovered all that, and then I'm like, holy crap, this is big, this is huge. And this, at the same time, you have the wind farms that are popping all around the island. We can use this dome to really increase the potential for all the wind farm project that we have on the island, but also for compressed air, things that I've all discovered at one point. So we're really there to help others to do more, to export more, to be able to maximize their investment. Those wind farms like GH2, they will spend billions of dollars to maximize their project. At one point, they will need extra storage. Having a salt cavern like just 30 kilometers away is fantastic. So it is amazing that on the island, we have the largest salt dome on all the eastern seaboard of North America. And basically that's what we want to do. We want to enable people to do more and help them with their project and make sure we match the ambition that there is in Newfoundland and Labrador.
June 4th, Darlene Steele. She's the owner of Yoga Bloom Studio. It is episode 219. Darlene is an expert in yoga, and her transformation from running a little yoga studio out of her house to having her own place is discussed in this episode. She has great advice for you. I really enjoyed, and Allan enjoyed sitting down with Darlene. Episode 219 is the full episode. Here's the excerpt.
Hi, I'm Darlene Steele, owner of Yoga Bloom Studio on 19 Kingsbridge Road in St. John's, and I'm happy to be here.
Darlene, it's great to have you in the conversation. Darlene, take us at the beginning of your journey. Where did you grow up, and how did you grow up, and what was life like?
Well, when you just talked about Marconi, my dad actually had learned how to do Morse code.
Is that right?
That's a job that he had for a while. So he often used to show me, he would be tapping for many years, in his mind, sending out the messages.
Oh, wow.
And he used to tell me funny stories, so sometimes they'd get messages mixed up.
Is that when he worked with the Americans?
No, that was before that.
Right.
Yeah, that was before that. So that was interesting. So I grew up in South River in Conception Bay North, just a small community. My mom moved there as a teacher at 16, and my dad had grown up there. So they, Eric and Ada, they raised 6 of us, so 5 siblings. So that's where we got our roots and got our kicks and got our hard knocks. But it was a fun time to grow up. Obviously, I say to people, a lot simpler than it is now. But then I look at my dad's life and what a shift between his life and my life. My dad at 14 went on the Kyle fishing to Labrador.
Wow.
So isn't that kind of mind-blowing to think, like, from that to our generation now to the next generation? It's almost hard to comprehend.
The Kyle is the ship that's aground.
It is in Harbor Grace.
Wow.
Yeah, so
And
he
your dad
told
was
me a
14
story.
years old?
14 when he went on the Kyle fishing. So he had to leave school, obviously. His father lost his leg in the Bell Island mine, so couldn't work. So my father had to go to work. So 14, and he said he was scared to death. He was froze. It was cold. His first time going over. So I think about that a lot, how things have shifted in that generation.
Had there been a history of people going to sea in his family, or was he the first?
Particularly, yeah, he was, that, to my knowledge. So we grew up hearing all those stories. My mom grew up in Placentia Bay in an island called Haystack, and grew up hearing those stories. It was a world away, So now for my son, it's completely unfathomable, like on a ship to Labrador at 14 to fish.
Yeah.
So. But it was a fun time to grow up, and 6 of us in a small house. I always think one little bathroom. At one point, my brother in a single bed, my sister and I in a double bed. But it's all we knew. And I found like most of our friends were similar situations, so it is all you knew, really. So I decided to open the studio during COVID. It was challenging at first. We would measure. Literally, I had tape on the floor. Everybody wore their masks, so it wasn't ideal, but at least we were together. And I'm really thankful for my students because most of them followed me from my home during COVID. And then slowly I started by myself. they spread the word, and I got Christy to come on teaching some gentle and some beginner classes, which are awesome. And then got, some other teachers on board. I have the chair yoga, and then Bev does an after work class. We've got a Saturday morning class, and Kelly Bursey comes in and does some specialty classes, sound bowl, beautiful sound bowl, relaxation, restorative classes. I have a guy, John Foley, comes in to do some meditation classes on the weekend, so workshops. So it's really grown the past year from myself, past year and a half, myself, and then Christy, and then kind of having the other teachers.
So you ended it on that word, and I want to pick up on that word. Don't you see how beautiful it is that you were told a long time ago there's no jobs in being a teacher, and here you are today.
Yes.
You're a teacher.
I do think about that. And it's like, so when people tell you, I mean, you tell this to your kids, but when people tell you not to do it, sometimes you need that one person to say, you can do it, At the time, it's not that, I think, again, family were just about getting a job. They were looking after you.
Yeah.
People wanted the best for you.
Right?
Yeah. But so to think back about, and I love teaching. I truly get joy from teaching. So I do believe it's where I was meant to be. Like, I think we all have a calling in life. Sometimes we figure it out early, sometimes we figure it out later, and it doesn't have to be, we kind of get stuck into this huge thing, got to change the world, but I don't think so. I think you just got to try to find that, and I think it's a blessing if we find that in life, that blessing. So I do feel, I'm in my mid-50s now, and some people are saying, gee, you're just starting, I'm finishing. I couldn't imagine starting at your age. So, people have said that to me, and I get it, but I don't feel that way. I feel thankful that I have the energy and the...
I always wonder, what are you going to do? Retire and twiddle your thumbs?
Yeah,
I don't see retirement.
No.
Retirement is a different thing.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you to have created a brand that's well known in the community and has respect of people that, a lot of people?
Well, I hope so. Thank you. It feels good. I feel like I've had a lot of support from people, and that's the thing, because without the people that come to class, right, that's what creates a studio. I love the community there, and I think to my family who've supported me and said, yes, you can do it. You can do it. Sometimes, like I said, you just need a couple of people to say you can do it. And then my friends at, my friend Fonda Bushel, she did my logo and painted the beautiful blooms in my studio that people comment all the time. The people come in and say, oh, there's a piece in here, and that's really what I wanted. So I'm proud, very proud of the studio, proud of the work that we all do, all my instructors. Without them, again, you can't have the studio without the instructors. So I think of it as a group effort, and I feel very privileged and very grateful that I get the opportunity to teach, and to have the studio.
I love listening to you talk about that. And anyone who's created a business, Allan and I have created a brand, and it just feels good.
It does.
And pride is not a bad thing. I think a lot of people say, I think confidence and cockiness are two different things.
I agree.
Confidence is something that takes a long time to develop. And there's things, even as you develop your confidence, that can knock you back.
Oh,
right?
Totally.
Tell us a little bit about that, the business side and all that.
100%. So my husband has always been in the business, and I've been separate from that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I laugh sometimes because someone had once said to me, well, I'll tell you how to stop enjoying yoga, open a studio. And I kind of understand now what they mean, because you have the business of it, right? So you have the paperwork of it, and the administrative work, and the cleaning, and so the advertising, which I struggle with, on the social media side of it.
Coming from radio, that's funny, actually.
Yeah, I know, but I do, because, I think it's more of the going down that rabbit hole in social media that I never ever did before. And sometimes they're like, oh, I don't, but it's important. It's how we advertise.
Number 6 on our top 10 list is Kaylah Mercer. That was episode number 220. Kaylah is an executive. She's worked in the healthcare field. She also is a very good friend of Fatemeh Mohammadi, a young lady who's been on our podcast before. In this episode, Fatemeh interviews Kaylah Mercer, and I tell you, it was a really interesting discussion. She talked a little bit about, they both talked about LinkedIn and the benefit to your business. Here's an excerpt of episode 220 now.
So I'm Kaylah Mercer. Yes, we were speaking earlier on where my name came from, and it was a soap opera star from popular show in the 80s. I think it's actually still airing today. Days of Our Lives.
Yes, I remember that from the show Friends.
Oh, funny. You know what? I've never seen Friends, so maybe I should.
Yes, one of the characters specifically was one of the actors at Days of Our Lives. That was the whole
Okay.
team. Yeah.
So I tell my mom that's why I'm so dramatic. She named after a soap opera star.
So, what do you do for a living, generally speaking?
Well, I tell everyone that I'm a mom first. So I'm a mom. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old, and I've been married for almost 6 years now. And I also have a couple of other gigs that are around more like volunteer-based work. So I sit on the board of directors for Choices for Youth and the board of directors for the St. John's Farmers Market. So very busy, but one of my big passions kind of growing up was always giving back to the community. And helping those in need, and that's how my parents raised me. So I try to show my children what that's like to give back to community, and that it's important to spend time.
Yeah, the morals that you need
Yeah.
to teach kids.
Yeah.
One thing I always liked about you, and it's also the first thing that whenever I hear your name, I'm reminded of, is the topic we talked about, Tequity Plus, likability.
Yes.
I am very young. If you wanted to go back and give advice about likability to a 22, 23-year-old, any university student, any college student, what would be the first thing that you would say about likability?
Well, I could put myself back in your shoes at your age, and I actually got into my professional career pretty early. It was pretty quickly after my undergrad, and I think a big weight you put on yourself when you enter to the workforce is they have to like me, or you'll do maybe sometimes things outside of your job description or other additional tasks to show that you want to be liked or appreciated or kept on. I put a lot of, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so if I could go back and tell myself and in the future workforce, young women, young professional women, about likability, it's probably just to be yourself. Not everybody's going to like you. And that's a really hard thing to hear sometimes, because when we go through our career path or we go through even the school system, you go into a room. If you're a new person, you moved here, you didn't know anybody here. You came here, you walk into a room, you want people to like you. You want them to accept you. Exactly. So I think it's no different than going into the workforce. When you get hired by a division or a department, you walk in, you're so excited. You want people to appreciate you, who you are as a person, and you want to, be kept on in your role, potentially grow up in your, move on up in your positions, depending on what your career goals are. But at the end of the day, it's actually the least important thing. Being authentic to yourself. Yes, absolutely. Because I think we, especially young women, tend to cater more to our environment or to work tasks so that we're liked.
Yes, I agree.
And it's really hard to move out of that, because I've been a perfectionist my entire life. It's been something I've been working on for the last, 2.5 years, kind of moving away from environments where I can't be myself, or I feel like I'm almost an actress, because I want that likability factor to be so high. But as I'm entering my mid-30s now, I'm 12 years into my career, and if I were to write a paper now on things that got me to where I am, it wouldn't be that everyone along the way liked me.
Like me, yeah. I always ask the question, do I like everybody? Mm-hmm. Do I feel like I like everyone the same? The answer is always no. You have some people in your life that you obviously spend more time with, you know about them a lot, so you have that connection with them, and as soon as their name comes up, you're like, oh, I love this person.
Yes, yes.
But when a new person comes in, I don't think anybody would judge you based on the knowledge or the experience that you have. It's more about getting to know you, and ultimately, it's not a force. Like you can't force it on everybody to necessarily like you along the way. You got to do you, and whether they like it or not, whether you're suitable for the job or not, you'll be laid off or continue working with them, which is an important factor in my opinion. I think very, very, very important. But I feel like as far as my generation goes, that likability part is becoming more important because as soon as you see someone, the next thing you do, I don't want to call it stalking, but the next thing you do, you start going through their social media accounts, trying to find out where they're from instead of having that conversation to get to know them.
Yes.
And not everybody necessarily posts on social media how their actual life looks like. I say that all the time. It might be a little bit contradicting when you look at my social media, but I try my best to only share the moments that I want to remember myself. It's about happy days and sad days.
Yeah.
Everything's not bubbly, but at the same time, I feel like it's a bit narrower in my generation, whereas there is that judging part when it comes to social media and checking out. Now, I know that you said you're a mom of two. What is your take on that? What do you think of your kids going through social media and not judging, but basically coming to conclusions about someone's personality based on their social media posts?
I actually did a CBC interview on this topic with Jacqueline.
Ooh, nice.
Yes.
Love Jacqueline.
It was actually a very interesting topic because it's come up quite frequently, especially in the world of those who are in momhood and who have children that are going through school. When I went through a school system that social media wasn't introduced until I was in high school. I have younger nieces and nephews now that are going through the grade school system and they have cell phones, which I have two minds on this because it's my biggest fear, honestly, as a parent, that one day my kids are going to be like social media will be their life for a season of their lives. And how can I allow that to be a part of their growth and development? It's a part of inclusion with your friends. There's that other side of it too, where if I tell my daughter, you can't have a cell phone, but all of her friends have a cell phone.
Yeah, they can't.
Then is she going to be bullied? Is she going to be exempted from, birthday parties or social events because they're only sharing them on social media? There's definitely a value add to that as well. Going in, I know TechNL has a similar.
They have the student
system,
weekly, yes.
Exactly, where they kind of engage the students. I don't know if it's K to 12 or if it's a little bit of the older school age kids, but going in and actually listening to their ideas, I think has a very positive effect even on the student more than the company, because I can only imagine being a fourth grader and these big established people come in and they want to know what my idea is for something.
Yes.
And I think that will propel this mindset in that young individual that what I said was valuable or someone was interested in my ideas. And then, you'll put them down a path, I think, that
and they do that for
they could become baby entrepreneurs,
yes.
and go into, what I mean is that you may actually influence them so positively that
you might even say something that brings new ideas.
The seventh out of our top 10 for 2024 is Allan and Kevin Keats. Episode 216. They are prospectors in central Newfoundland who struck gold. It is an incredible story. The gold find in Gander has been said to be, by Eric Sprott, one of the largest gold finds in the history of Canada and possibly the history of the world. You heard that right. Allan and Kevin, a father and son team, joined us on episode 216. This is worth your time.
My name is Kevin Keats. I'm actually, this is my dad, Allan, and we've been at the prospecting sector, industry, whatever you want to call it, for the last 50 years or more, 6, 7 generations of our family. And this has been a fun ride with Newfound Gold and rally drilling, work with them daily. It's been fun, been a fun ride. How about yourself, sir?
Well, my name is Allan Keats, and I'm Kevin's father, and I guess it's just something that I got onto my great-great-grandfather, Sully Joel, would found mineral from Beatty Spear, and he used to travel across to Port Lambert, and in his routes, I guess he found that mineral, and nobody ever found it. We went looking for it. But it ended up that there was a mining company that came to Gander, And my father and me went up and told them about this, and meanwhile, the rest is history, I guess, but they are the sign. And I guess this is about the third deposit that I've been involved in. And the Duck Pond mine and the one before that, Point Leamington, bigger than there, one of them just lower grade. And now this one, so I got one more to go. And I had fun.
This is a multi-generational journey you fellas are on. I mean, it goes way back.
Oh, absolutely. It goes right back to great-great-grandfather Sully Joe, who, as Dad said, was full Micmac Indian, was a trapper, found silver on his trap line, didn't know what he had, knew he had mineral, took it to somebody, showed him, they assayed it and went from there. And then, as Dad said, they went and got the job. And then from there, we've, as times changed, we got some family members that were a little more smarter, I want to call it, in the business side, and then they started staking claims, going out prospecting on their own, selling the claims to mining companies, and learning how to do option deals with companies and things like that. And then they learned this in Ontario, came back to Newfoundland, told Dad, myself, and all other family members, and then we said, yeah, we can do this too.
Right.
So me and Dad tracked many a ground, staked many claims. My younger brother, Sully, was with us many times. My nephews, now my sons, both work for Newfound Gold. My cousins, they got multiple public companies trading on the Toronto Stock Exchange. I was involved with one for 13 years, ran it, formed it, co-former, I should say. Just a great whole story. And Dad always says he would never change a thing. Never change a thing. It was such a fun ride, and it's still more to come,
Dad, from your point of view, what does it feel like to look back, when you were young and your granddad and your dad going through this, and now watching it permeate to your son and your grandkids? How's that feel? You're right in the middle of all of this.
I just can't explain it.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. And I might add, like when I started out, Dad couldn't read nor write. And I only had grade 8. But I ended up, I guess he guided me steps, or somebody did. And like I said, I went to work in '69 with Noranda. I was with him for 28 years. I was field foreman for 26. And this is the end results.
Wow. So, fellas, tell us about some of the big significant finds and what that's turned into in this room today.
Okay, well, for me, the biggest find in this room today is to be able to still sit here with my dad.
Yeah, me.
I was a kid. He put me in the backpack and trekked me through the woods.
Go on.
I'm serious.
Really?
And then he would get tired, and he'd say, okay, you got to get out now and you got to walk. So I'd walk. Then I'd say, Dad, my legs are tired.
Yeah.
And to be able to sit here and see this in my hometown, where I went to high school and the elementary school, my peers, to be able to sit here with my dad, is the best success story of it all.
Best find of all.
Oh, it's the best one.
Better than any gold in the ground, right there.
Back to the other side, the Newfound Gold. Right now we don't know how much gold is there, but we know there's a lot of gold. Mm-hmm. And it all started from my uncle Fred, who worked for Noranda as well, discovered some gold. And at the same time, Noranda was getting out of gold, leaving the province. And Fred kept it in his mind, and of course it went, the crown, the land reverted back to the crown. It came open, and the ground came open, and it got into a big staking dispute. This company said they got it, this one got it. Long story short, after, say, 10 years, it got awarded to a company that was defunct, sat there, and then my dad noticed that it was coming open.
No, excuse me for something in there. Elanor Mercer sent me a map, and he was working with the government, and he knew about the boiler and that, and he said, "El, do you realize this is coming open?" And I wasn't much good at that, and I think I might have been working with somebody else. Kevin was with Fort Knox. And we phoned Peter Dimmel, and Peter Dimmel's taking it.
That's right. So
March 30th, number 8 in our top 10, Blair, Tim, and Barry Lane. They created Lane's Life. I can't remember how many actual facilities they have now, but they have well in excess of 1,000 beds, maybe more. They are providing a service to Newfoundland and Labrador for our seniors that is second to none. In this excerpt from the full episode of 214, we'll have some advice from Barry, and it's worth your time.
Happen overnight.
No.
What we're looking at here right now. This was a long journey to get here, and it started when you were young folks, right? So tell me about that. Tell me what it was like growing up in the Lane household when you were little fellows while this business was growing.
Yeah, well, we our younger brothers, I guess, really grew up in the business. Tim and I, for me, grew up as preachers' kids in Newfoundland, all bounced around all rural Newfoundland. And I actually graduated in '97, left home, moved to the U.S., started college down there, and in '98, Mom and Dad got into the business. So I didn't really grow up in the business. Our younger brothers grew up in the business, but I guess it was always in Dad's blood. Wherever he went, he was always building something, making some dream come true, building a church or building a house. It was sort of his life always, right?
Yeah.
And caring for people in ministry, of course, right?
And I think that in ministry, that's one thing that we grew up and we always saw Mom and Dad really attracted to seniors. So even before they got into the retirement home business, any church that they were involved in, they always were connected with the seniors, and the seniors always loved them, even though there was quite an age gap. They always took care of the seniors in the church, and so it wasn't a shock when they decided, after they were done in ministry, to go into the retirement home business. It was like a natural progression.
And you guys must remember that a lot of seniors around and in your life back then. What was that like?
Yeah, it was wonderful. I mean, like Tim said, a large percentage of the population were senior, especially in rural Newfoundland, and you got connected with them. And as the preacher's kids, of course, you got spoiled a little bit with baked goods dropped off to the house every other day, and you got to sort of look forward to Mrs. Shepherd's homemade chocolate chip loaf. I can remember that one. So it was a lot of fond memories, and even going to church on a Sunday morning, they made a fuss over you. It was special.
Sunday nights after church, there was always going to someone's house for a snack, and most of the times it was seniors that would have you in and crack open a bottle of moose meat and stuff like that there, and so
it sounds like a Norman Rockwell upbringing.
Yeah, we had a great upbringing. Absolutely. Yeah.
When did you get pulled into the seniors home? At what point in your life did you get pulled in?
Yeah, well, I was just married a couple years, I guess. Mom and Dad started into the business in '97, and in 2000 I got married. And in early 2001, Dad called and said, I'm thinking about purchasing a retirement home out in central Newfoundland and wondering if you and your wife, we were only 21 at the time, 20 and 21. My wife was 20, I was 21, and wondering if you guys would be interested in moving out and running the home. And so we thought about it and said, yeah. We went out and visited, I did, and looked at it, and decided to get involved. And even though we were really young and most of our staff were really older, it just became something natural pretty quickly. And the greatest part was definitely the residents and the connections, and even 20 years later, I still remember most every one of their names, and I still have all the memories and the stories of that first 4 years in that first retirement home that we started in.
Barry, how did you know that they could do it at such a young age?
Well, I guess, like I said, my wife worked in a home. So that was her passion. She loved seniors, working with seniors. Actually, the first year she left school, she was contemplating going for nursing. And I fooled all that up when we got married and what have you. But I guess it was her, you know, it was Sheila that had the vision for it. And once the boys grew up among it, like the two younger sons as well, it just came so natural. And these guys, when they came home and they started on the floors the same as everybody else, and they all the care that had to be done, they done it, you know, and it was hard, you know, for young men to do that. But we felt it was very important if they were going to learn this business, they had to start at the grassroots. And once they start running these facilities, the staff, they can look at their staff and say, you know, if they say, I can't do this, well, oh yes, you know, we did this ourselves. We've been there. We know this is the kind of care that we want to give to our residents, and we did it, and we have to provide for them, you know. And so that's really what the driving force that for them to keep going is learning the grassroots of everything in the operation, like, you know.
Yeah, I think I remember the first 4 years. We didn't always appreciate that, being so young, that we had to do everything. Those first 4 years, we did all the personal care. There was times I cooked. I never cooked before, if needed. Did all the books, did all the maintenance, did all the hospital transportation, kept the grounds up. So I think in those early years, we probably didn't appreciate it, but certainly as we grew more into business, we realized now, even after that, how important it was to do everything. Because like Dad said, we learned that we could relate to our staff more because we had the opportunity to understand what they go through on a day-to-day basis. Instead of just, okay, you're going to manage this home, you sit in office. I'm glad that wasn't how it went, for sure.
But it must have felt amazing at the age of 21 to know that you had your dad's confidence to run such an important establishment.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was. I don't know if he had confidence first. He took a risk, and but he certainly felt good as we went on, and we took over the first home. It was 13 residents, and we built it up to 45, and so it was a great learning experience. And there was lots of stuff during those first 4 years that Dad or Mom would tell us that we still speak of today in staff meetings. We still relay the same kind of wisdom that Dad. I remember one thing Dad always said to us was, you know, the family that gives you the most trouble, they're the ones that keeps you on your toes, and if you can please them, then you'll please everybody, and you'll run an amazing home. And we still talk about that today in our staff meetings with our staff and new managers we hire, and yeah.
You're there in the States.
Well, yeah, actually, by that time I was working at a gold mine in Red Lake, Ontario. I bounced around a bit, but I was crusher operator there, and Dad called one day and said, looking at it, building a new home in Victoria, and I wondered if you want to come home and run it. So I talked to my wife, and we, you know, we were newly married as well. We got married in 2000 as well, and we were looking for an opportunity to come back to Newfoundland to start a family. You know, Newfoundland always tugs at your heart to come home, and so we wanted to be home and raise kids. So it was a perfect opportunity. And I was going to say, I mean, Mom and Dad were never far away. They were very hands-on. I mean, yes, they put trust and faith in us to do the job, but they were never far away. I can remember many times having to.
Number 9 in our top 10, posted on March 19th, is Mike Herriott. Episode 208. Mike and I went to high school together. Mike is one of the preeminent trumpet players in the entire world. And it is, for me, it was a thrill to catch up with him. I went to high school with him. I played trumpet. Obviously not as good as him, but I tell you, he is so knowledgeable about playing the trumpet that, as I said, he's one of the world's preeminent trumpet players. He's played all over the world. Episode 208, the excerpt. Listen to it now.
Well, Jerry, I'm Mike. Nice to meet you. I think we did that back in, what would have been, 81? Brother Rice High School Band.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you right off the bat because I said this to you through Facebook as we were communicating. I'll never forget the first day in band at Brother Rice. And, you know, I'm an amateur trumpet player, and you'll see we've got our trumpets here. This is a professional, I'm an amateur. Anyway, long story short, Mike sat down next to me, and you probably don't even remember this, and you did a few things on the trumpet, and I was like, holy shit. That's the way the trumpet is to be played. But then you went and you took a saxophone. I believe you did some work on the drums. And I don't even know.
I've never played a saxophone.
You've never?
No.
Okay, well, you know what? Maybe I'm embellishing it. But
my parole officer has told me that's my official line. I've never played it. No, I don't play any woodwind instruments. But I have delved into other brass instruments, just kind of out of necessity. And I picked up playing the trombone when I was living out west in BC.
Yeah.
Just because it looks like so much fun to do, you know. And everyone, I knew so many great trombone players out in Vancouver, Victoria, that it always looked like they were all having so much fun playing it. I figured I'd try. So it's the thing about the brass instruments is that they're all related very closely, because with the trumpet, when you press down this valve here, it adds enough metal to the instrument to lower it a semitone.
Right.
And then you press this one down, it adds twice as much metal. This one here adds 3 times as much metal. So between the 3 of those, the combination of them, you can add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 different instruments, essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So with the harmonic series, so there's 7 different instruments that you got there. All those notes overlap, so you can play a chromatic scale, and you've got.
Last but not least is episode number 10. July 16th, episode number 225, Carol Bartlett. Carol Bartlett is a business development and sales guru. She created a process called the LEAP method. Carol Bartlett, for me, was, I spent close to 40 years in sales and business development myself. So Carol, for me, was just a treat to listen to her talk about the sales and the business development environment. Please listen to that excerpt now.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for doing this. It's wonderful to be on the show. I followed it, and great content, fabulous people that you've had interviewed. So I'm just honored to be here, really.
Well, look, you know what? We are just interested in inspiring people, and I know you're one of them. You have experience yourself on a podcast, but let's go back. Let's go back to when you were younger, some of the influences. You know, you're an entrepreneur, and tell us a little bit about, you know, what it was like in your childhood, and then we'll take this conversation wherever you want it to go.
Wherever it goes. Okay, well, I'll tell you where I've ended up. So I do sales training, sales strategy, and I help companies grow on the revenue side. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But mainly one of the reasons why I do what I do is because I love money. The reason why I love money so much, and I'm so obsessed about it, is because I was raised poor. Like my family was the second poorest family in the community that I was raised in, and you know, one of the memories that I have while I had a reasonably good childhood is that my father would sit down at the end of the month on the back of an envelope, and he would write out the monthly bills and total them up, and it would always be more than what we had coming in as a family, and that always stayed with me. And I was like, I have to figure out this money thing. And as I grew up, I always was interested in what was money, how did money work, is it linear, is it spherical, and what is the mechanisms of money. So that's why I love money. It's a part of who I am. I'm not shameful about it. I love money. I love making money. I love making money for other companies. I love talking about money. If anybody comes in into the house or wants to talk about personal finances, that's what I'm there. I'm all there. That jazzes me.
It's funny, you know, when you first said that, I love money, I was actually a little taken aback by that because it's not something that people normally say.
No.
But you're unapologetic about it.
Unapologetic. Why?
And frankly,
Why?
I understand why. And I'll tell you quickly, you know, my mom was a single mom. My dad died when I was 14. I had the same experience. My mom was struggling to make ends meet. And I think I got into sales because it was a way to make money. And my mom always used to say to me, you know, you got a degree in university. Why are you in sales? Frankly, I didn't have the heart to tell her that it was probably the best paying job of anyone in St. John's, you know what I mean? So similar experience, hey?
That's why I got into it. So early in my career, my family was very, very supportive to get an education. I was good at math and science, so I went into physics, and then there was really no route to making money in that pathway. And then somebody introduced me to geophysics, and I quickly went into that. So I have a master's degree in geophysics, and I spent 20 years in oil and gas. Always employed, always traveling the world, great experience. I recommend it to do it, to anyone to do it. But there was a time when you just topped out of, when you were a scientist, you were at the top of the pay scale. And then I was like, okay, well, how do I get to the next? How do I get to the next? And that next was really, for me, it was management, but it was on the sales side. And the more in sales you were, the more money that came in. And then when you look at it, just as you said, it's limitless when you're in sales of what you can do. So that is the true magic. And that's why I do what I do now.
Yeah. So your dad struggled writing it on the back of a piece of paper. Your mom, did she work as well, or was it just one income?
It was mainly just one income. My father had retired when I was 6, so it was a fixed income.
Wow.
I had older parents, and it kind of was what it was.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about it now, you know, you don't mind saying that? Or was there ever a time in your life when you wouldn't tell that story, or have you always been open about it?
I don't know if I've ever thought about it that way. I always knew what drove me, and I was always very focused on money, and I was unapologetic about it. Like when people say, well, I don't do it for the money, or money is the root of all evil. Like, it's not. Money is what helps you have a great lifestyle. It helps me take care of my family. Like, I was able to buy a house for my mother when I was 28. Like, and I've provided ever since. So, you know, and I do now. So these are the types of things that when you have money that allows you to do those things. You know, when I look to charities, I support the charities that are in line with my values. And that's the power of having money. And I think that's why we should, you know, open up to money and understanding it.
Well, you know, I can't help but think of the province as a whole, Newfoundland and Labrador, and the struggles that we've had as an entity over the years. And you're right, like, people don't have knowledge about how to make money, but I'm excited about the future because I think there's so much going on in this province. And to your point, the more money everybody has, the more wealth, the more ability to have some comfort, right? Because it's not comfortable to not have money. Let's be honest.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, they did a happiness chart of how much money you had to make in order to be happy. And that, at the time, it was $60,000, right? So that was probably 15 years ago. So maybe now it's around the $75,000, $80,000 mark. But you have to have a certain amount of money in order to create that happiness, because otherwise you're always worried about money.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's probably some people listening that want to be in a non-for-profit setting, and it is about giving, and I think those things are vitally important. For me, I'm able to use my talents to make that money, and then, you know, decide where I want that money to go. So.
Well, you know, I find this conversation incredibly refreshing, and frankly, it's not exactly where I thought you were going to go with it, but Yeah, and it's funny, I am the same as you, but I think in the sales world, I set goals, and I think we all need it. We're going to delve into that, but the money didn't drive me as much as the passion for making sure the client was happy. Underlying all that, of course, was the money, but it tended to take care of itself as long as you were providing really good service. So you are you went to high school, and then you went on, you got your master's in geophysics, you said? Wow. So was that something that, were you the first in the family to get an education like that?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the motivations around that and having no mentors, or maybe you did have an educational mentor. There you have it, folks. That's the top 10 episodes of 2024. This marks episode number 233 in the Gale Force continuing journey. Just a little bit about Gale Force Wins. We started on Zoom. We started interviewing entrepreneurs. Every Tuesday night, we give you an episode with some entrepreneur based somewhere in the world. That is going to continue. However, we do need to pay our bills. Please like, subscribe, go on our social media and follow us. LinkedIn is our primary methodology of sharing our information. Facebook is next, and Instagram. What I'd like to say to you is that we have an ability to go to trade shows. We finance our ability to give you these inspiring conversations by traveling around the world, shooting content somewhat like this that you may never see. However, it's for businesses and organizations around the world. So thanks again for joining us. This is the top 10 of 2024, and it's episode number 233.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Wins. That's Gale Force Wins, WINS.com.